be screwed, feel my own adrenaline. Yeah, I do just what I do, and I hope you let me in, yeah.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to Cypherfics. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the 6th part of, What If Harry Potter Meets My Little Pony? Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of tkepner on fanfiction.net. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Each of the fillies wilted under the fierce glare of a relative. Spike had retreated to the hallway. He wanted no part of the drama, but his curiosity wouldn't allow him to completely leave. Plus, Rarity was here. So, snarled Applejack, just how long have y'all been visitin' this here portal? How many times have you been to his world? Apple Bloom gulped. You have been designing dresses and you haven't shown me your designs, an upset Rarity growled. Sweetie Belle hung her head down and avoided her sister's eyes. Auntie Holiday simply glared at Scootaloo, who mumbled, I am so grounded. Twilight sat back. I'm going to have to tell Princess Celestia about how lax the guards have been, she said thoughtfully, staring at one of the library bookshelves with her eyes out of focus. 3 fillies and a colt regularly sneaking past them, both night and day. She shook her head ruefully. She straightened up, but first, Harry Potter, you're going to show me this portal so I can examine it myself. Harry shivered. No, he said quietly, but firmly. All the Maras turned to him. No, echoed Twilight disbelievingly. Still shivering, he said, if I show you, you'll go through it. If you go through it, you'll go as you are and that means you'll be naked in my world. If someone sees you, and someone will see you because it's a public park, you'll be arrested and taken to the guard station. Once the tree is out of your sight, you'll never find it again. He took a shaky breath, so, no. I won't be responsible for losing you in my world. He shivered so hard he almost fell over. He had never defied Twilight before. Snuck under her rules, pretended to not hear her warnings, but never had he outright, to her face, defied her. At the Dursleys, that would have rated a severe beating. Here, he knew it didn't, but the echoes of the paranoia and fear were still there. Before I show you the portal, you have to have a dress to wear. You have to know how to walk on your rear legs, remember how hard it was for me the first few days. And you have to agree to do as I say. I know my world. Terrible things can happen very fast, especially if someone is trying to do what they think is the right thing for you. Which for you, would be the absolutely wrong thing. He forced himself to look straight into her eyes. In its own way, my world is as dangerous to you as the ever-free forest is to a foal. You simply don't know what's dangerous and what isn't, nor where to look for the danger. Twilight was staring at him as if she had never seen him before. He's right, Chui, said Applejack. He's telling the truth. He's really worried for you. Terrified, even. The Maras stood quietly, thinking, while the fillies stayed grouped around Harry, with Apple Bloom slightly in front of him. I can make you a simple dress in a few minutes, if I had a pattern, said Rarity, looking at Sweetie Belle. Sweetie Belle gulped and nodded quickly. And Apple Bloom and I can show you how to walk, Scootaloo said eagerly. It's really not as hard as Harry makes it sound. Twilight blinked slowly, then nodded. I'll go get the patterns, Sweetie Belle said hesitantly, they're in our clubhouse. She started to edge away from Harry, keeping a wary eye on her sister, who was still giving her a stern glare. I'll do it, declared Harry quickly, and popped away before any pony could object. Sweetie Belle sighed, she had been looking forward to escaping her sister's death glare. Apple Bloom sighed, she wished she, too, had a reason to dash out. Scootaloo just tried to hide behind her friends and look innocent. "I'll be grounded until I'm older than Granny Smith," she mumbled, glancing at her Aunt Holiday. Into the short silence that had descended on the group came another pop as Harry reappeared, beside the three fillies. "Here," Harry said, removing 3 dresses from the box balanced on his back and tossing them towards his herdmates. He dropped the box beside himself on the floor, then removed several large sheets of paper and floated them over to Rarity. "Those are the patterns that Sweetie Belle created. They're real simple. We didn't want anything that would stand out and make people remember seeing us." He stopped and looked eagerly at the fashionista. The fillies had slipped into their dresses, each a simple modified plain summer dress in a solid color, and now were standing up on their rear legs. In length, the dresses fell to the floor, which, when they were in Harry's world, were halfway between their knees and the ground. These were a decided improvement over the sacks they had first tried to use. Rarity was alternately looking between the fillies and the papers held in her magic, comparing what the fillies wore to Sweetie Belle's diagrams. Harry concentrated, and carefully cast an illusion beside Scootaloo of what she looked like on the other side wearing the dress. "See how the lines are different? How the straps hold the dress up? And how much longer her legs are?" The fillies were shuffling from hoof to hoof, unsure of how their relatives would take their new look. The unusual sight of their fillies standing and moving almost naturally on only their rear hooves while wearing the most unusual dresses any of them had ever seen had the Mares flummoxed into silence. Rarity walked over and took a closer look at Sweetie Belle's dress, then Scootaloo's and Apple Bloom's. Then compared them to the illusion Harry had cast. They had decided on backless dresses to accommodate Scootaloo's wings on this side. Unfortunately, Scootaloo had what looked like an extremely detailed tattoo of wings on her back when in Harry's former world. And to give a child a tattoo was very illegal in Britain and inevitably got child services involved. While the kids in the playpark might not care, their parents would surely notice and report Scootaloo to the constables. And the constables would take Scootaloo to their station and try to track down Scootaloo's parents. So, to keep anyone from questioning why and how she had gotten something so illegal, Sweetie Belle had sewn a cloth panel across the back between the wide shoulder straps. The bottom of the panel attached to the dress by 2 buttons. That kept the panel closed so the wind couldn't blow it up and reveal Scootaloo's secret, while allowing her wings to manifest in Equestria without causing her discomfort. Twilight also moved closer and studied how the fillies were standing. Auntie Holiday and Applejack continued to glare at their respective reckless niece and sister. Rarity took a step over to Harry and looked into the box. "What about your clothes, Harry?" "Wait, what's this?" A magazine floated up. Across the top was Vogue with a headline at the bottom that said, "Fast Forward. Summer fashion on the move, glamorous sportswear." The background was a lake or bay with a city on the opposite shore. The woman on the front was wearing a red thigh-length bare shoulders dress, a shorter version of what the fillies were wearing. Except theirs had wider neck openings, with green and blue animal designs. Her jaw dropped. The cover opened and pages flipped by almost too fast for Harry to follow, but with each page Rarity became more excited. This is a gold mine. The fashions, they're nothing I've ever seen, nothing I've even imagined. This will revolutionize the fashion industry." She turned to Sweetie Belle. "You've had this for months and you never told me." Her hurt expression made Harry feel terrible. Sweetie Belle looked about to burst into tears and stared guiltily down at the floor. "It's my fault," Harry confessed. "I made them all pinky promise not to tell anyone." He gave a half-hearted smile. "I was afraid that Princess Celestia would make me go back if she knew about the portal still being there and working." He shuddered. "Later, well, I was afraid of how much trouble I would be in for keeping the portal a secret. And how much my world could do to hurt this one, even by accident." Harry could just imagine what his uncle would do if he saw this idyllic world and the relatively defenseless ponies. He shuddered. "There are some very evil people in my world who wouldn't hesitate to lie, cheat, and steal once they got here, and they act like perfectly nice people so you never suspect them." Twilight walked over to him and nuzzled his neck. "Harry," she said softly, "we would never send you back to those horrid ponies, I promise." "People," Harry corrected quietly, leaning into her mane. After a moment, he reluctantly cleared his throat and said, "So, if you want to investigate the portal, Rarity needs to put together something like the girls are wearing for you Maras. And while she is doing that, the girls can show you how they learn to walk." Twilight immediately turned to her unicorn friend, Rarity. "How fast do you think you can throw something together?" Rarity was too wrapped up in investigating the magazine page by page to hear her, still flipping pages and occasionally stopping to stare. "Rarity? Still nothing. Rarity." The white unicorn jumped and looked up at Twilight. "This thing has almost 400 pages, and it says it's a monthly publication," she said dazedly. "That's more pages than any fashion magazine in Equestria publishes in half a year." She turned a stunned look to Harry. "What's the circulation?" He shrugged, "I don't know for sure. 1,000,000? That seemed to snap her out of her daze. 1,000,000? Nonsense. That would be almost an eighth of the entire population of Equestria. And I can guarantee you that the number of ponies interested in fashion is far fewer than that." "Well, Harry stumbled, "London, the big city near where I used to live, has a population of 6 million, and Britain as a whole is 56 million, if I remember correctly." 56 million, half-whispered Rarity. The other Mares, except Twilight, of course, looked just as stunned. He had told her this stuff months ago. "Yeah, the world population is about 5 or 6 billion. Billion?" Rarity said breathlessly. A billion is 1,000 millions, Harry explained. They stared at him. "Fillies," said Applejack quietly, "he's telling us the truth. He really believes those numbers. I can prove it." He pulled a thick book out of the box. "This is an almanac, it's the 1985 version, so it's about 5 years out of date." Twilight snatched the book out of his magic field so fast it looked as if she had teleported it. She started reading, flipping the pages at a steady, and fast, rate. "Where'd you get these things, Harry?" Applejack asked. Harry blushed. "Been diving." At Applejack's blank look, he added, "I went through the portal late one night and then went through people's trash bins looking for magazines and stuff. To answer Twilight's and the fillies' questions. He ran a hoof through his mane. I got lucky and the first night I found those two things, so I took them." He shuffled uncomfortably. "I took the almanac because I wanted better answers for Twilight, even if I couldn't tell her about the book. I just said I remembered more stuff a couple of days after she asked questions about where I came from." Applejack walked over the Twilight and waved a hoof between Twilight and the book. Twilight reared back, "JCK." Applejack glared at the purple alicorn. "Focus, Twilight. Portal." She then walked over to Rarity and did the same, snatching the magazine from her magic with her hooves. "Rarity, how long to make a simple dress?" Rarity blinked, and returned to the problem at hand. "Not long, I just need to get some material." She looked over to the colt. "Harry, are these dresses still appropriate for the weather in your homeworld?" "Oh, yes, it's the high summer there, quite like it is here now." She walked over to the other alicorn. "Twilight, dear, stand up," she gestured with her hoof. Awkwardly, Twilight reared up. She was about to lose her balance when Harry used his magic to help push her back to her balance. She staggered a few steps, but managed to stay upright. Rarity spent the time comparing her with the fillies and Harry's illusion. "Thank you, dear," she said, "now I know about how much material to use. I'll be right back." She trotted quickly to the door, stopping to stare back at Sweetie Belle. "And you have some explaining to do later, young mare." Sweetie Belle gulped and suddenly found something on the floor very interesting. Scootaloo, Apple Bloom, and Harry closed rank to let her know they supported her. As unhappy as she was, Rarity still managed a quick smile at the sight before she turned and left. Twilight thumped back to the floor. "Is standing and walking in Harry's world as difficult as it is here, she asked the fillies. We might as well start calling it Earth, Harry advised. Otherwise it sounds like I own the place. Twilight and the fillies gave him smiles and nodded. Earth it is, said Twilight. Actually, said Scootaloo, back on the original subject, standing and walking is easier, there. Twilight raised her eyebrows. Watch this, she instructed, removing her dress. She sat down and slowly leaned back until she was balanced on her butt and back legs. Then she slowly straightened just the upper parts of her legs, leaving her hocks, fetlocks, and hooves on the floor. It's a little weird feeling at first, she explained, but everything from your hocks to your hooves are actually flat on the ground and you use them to help balance. And they're really short, barely 2 hooves long instead of almost half your leg sticking out in front of you like now. Try it. Twilight followed her directions and was soon standing easily, rocking back and forth testing her balance. See how easy it is. Awkward, but easy. Twilight nodded. The other 2 Mares were now doing the same, experimenting with this new way of standing. Even Aunt Holiday was trying it. You're right, it is much easier to stand, Twilight said, and then tried to take a step. It was a short step, and she almost fell, but pressing with her fetlock kept her upright. After a few more attempts, she said, it's interesting, I have to consciously not go up onto my hooves when I take a step. On Harry's, Scootaloo glanced at the colt, Earth, it's not a problem at all. If you want to go up on your hooves, what Harry calls our toes, you have to consciously try to do it. But it's really hard to keep your balance, though. Harry thought that watching the Maras clump around the room like clowns with really big shoes on their feet was hilarious, but he couldn't explain to them why it was funny. While she was practicing, she had Spike send a 6-foot missive, she called it short at merely 1 celestial long, to Princess Celestia summarizing the situation. She included a separate 1-foot-long explanation on how the fillies taught her to walk upright. And then ended with a brief, 2-foot-long explanation of her intent to study the portal and ascertain its stability and usability as a permanent link to Earth, and to expect another message later this evening. She also included duplicates of the almanac, magazine, and Sweetie Belle's drawings. Watching as Spike sent the tightly rolled scrolls, the shorter ones inside the longer one, off to the princess, Harry wondered how Twilight expected her very busy ruler to have the time to read the unexpected message. He knew she would have to hand the almanac over to others to read. Barely an hour after leaving, Rarity returned with not 1, but 4 dresses. Took you long enough, Applejack said snarkily. Rarity sniffed and tossed her head dismissively. Quality can never be rushed, dear, she said in a snooty voice, lifting her snout up, and then grinned at the other mare. Twilight slipped her dress over her head and admired its straight simple lines. It was a deep purple that matched her coat perfectly, with the slightest shimmer of stars in it. And it seemed to fit her well. She looked up questioningly at the white unicorn. Rarity rolled her eyes, dear, you know I have your measurements, all I had to do was stand up a ponykin and select the correct fabric. She floated one of the other dresses to Applejack. That one was apple green. Applejack looked at her questioningly. Dear, are you really going to let Twilight walk through that portal, alone? To Scootaloo's aunt she said, I had to guess at your measurements, but I'm usually good at that. 5 minutes later, an alicorn, 3 mares, a colt, 3 fillies, and a young dragon headed out to Sweet Apple Acres. Twilight had the almanac firmly in front of her face, rapidly absorbing as much information as she could. The colt and fillies were closely packed, rubbing shoulders and flanks for reassurance. The mares had wanted to leave the fillies behind, but Harry had said, they have spent hours on Earth, and even talked with some of the other kids. They are far more likely to keep you out of trouble than you, them. It was a rather persuasive argument. And while the mares were not all that convinced, Harry's stance of, if they don't come along, then I won't show you how the portal works, had been the final close of the discussion. When they arrived at the guard post, Twilight greeted Sergeant True Sword, Harry Potter, here, knows where the portal is. You will accompany us while Corporal Runner goes to the guard station and brings reinforcements. "Yes, ma'am," responded the sergeant, with a salute, before turning to his corporal and issuing the order to send every pony who could be spared. The corporal nodded and stood unmoving. Harry was wondering why the pony wasn't moving when he abruptly vanished. Ah, he understood, now. The corporal was one of the few unicorns who had taken the time to mstr the teleport spell. Harry had to wonder why they all didn't learn it. He didn't think it was all that difficult. The small group headed into the ever-free forest, the sergeant leading the way and carefully inspecting the path for any dangers ahead or to the sides. Shivering at being in the ever-free forest, Holiday made sure to stay between Applejack and Rarity. They had barely gone 20 paces when the corporal ran up to the sergeant. "Sir," he said, gasping a little at his expenditure of magic, "the Pegasi are on their way and will be here soon. The others will be here as fast as practical." "Excellent, Corporal," the sergeant said approvingly, "you watch the left while I take forward and right." A salute and, "Yes, sir," was his answer. They had almost reached the portal tree when 5 Pegasi guards, weaving through the trees, flew up to them. Once they all arrived at the tree, the sergeant posted the guards in a ring around the tree and civilians. "Shall I be accompanying you?" he asked Twilight. No, unfortunately the portal changes our shapes and you wouldn't be of assistance due to your unfamiliarity with your new form. Stay here and keep everyone else safe." Twilight then turned from the sergeant and began casting spells at the tree, the other trees around it, on the ground, and even a few that seemed to go up into the air. Her quill shot across a floating scroll almost too fast for the ink to flow. Finally, she returned her attention to the tree and walked around it several times studying it from every angle and continuously casting more spells. Harry shrugged on his shirt and trousers, which were an odd fit in his pony form. He had to leave the buttons undone on the shirt and the trousers draped over his back. He had to hold them in place with his magic. The fillies slipped their dresses on and stood up on their hind legs. Twilight, Applejack, and Rarity followed suit, but with much less grace. They had to hold the dresses' hems off the ground with their hooves in this new stance. "And you're taking the fillies and colt?" the sergeant asked incredulously, with a raised eyebrow, as Harry and the fillies lined up beside the tree portal. They clearly intended to go through the portal. "Well, Sergeant," Twilight said dryly, "it seems the fillies and colt have been sneaking past your post and traveling to the world on the other side of this portal for over a year now." The sergeant, a grizzled veteran, blinked slowly. "They have they?" He turned a glare on the four. It was obvious he would have a few words with his ponies when today was done. And he knew his superiors would be having words with him over the post's security failures. "And they are the experts in what to expect over there," she finished. Harry gave the sergeant a guilty look and turned back to the tree. Twilight stepped up beside him. He looked up at her. "To make it work, you have to want to go to Little Whinging. Just think, Little Whinging. Wait about 15 seconds for me to make sure there's no one there to see us come through, okay?" He looked back at the tree, stood on his back legs, and stepped into it. It was late afternoon in Little Whinging, just as it was in Equestria. It was odd how closely things in one paralleled the other, including all those terrible pony puns on objects or place names, Encyclopedia Britannica instead of Encyclopedia Britannica or Baltimore instead of Baltimore, for example. There must be some sort of magical leakage between the two worlds. He took a quick look around and saw no one. He checked a couple of the branches and sticks he had left lying in certain spots to see if anyone had even been close to here. Nothing was disturbed, he was happy to see. He pulled his trousers into a more comfortable position, tightened his belt, put on his sandals, and buttoned his shirt. He had barely finished when Twilight came stumbling through, her saddlebags now on her hips like a pair of fancy bum bags, which promptly slid to the ground. He caught her arm and quickly braced his side against hers to help her keep her balance. Immediately behind her came Spike, who tripped over her saddlebags. Remarkably enough, he remained a dragon. A well-dressed dragon to be sure. Rarity and Twilight has used their magic to readjust some of his old clothes from when he and Twilight had lived in Canterlot and had to attend formal functions there, but still a dragon. Grumbling, he grabbed the fallen saddlebags so they wouldn't be in the way of the fillies following him. Scootaloo and Apple Bloom were next, and they caught Applejack and then Holiday as they stumbled through. Then Sweetie Belle appeared and right behind her was Rarity. The fillies slipped on their sandals as their relatives adjusted their clothes. The four Mares and Dragon looked around wonderingly at the strangely not menacing forest. First Twilight, then the other Mares noticed that while Scootaloo didn't have wings, she did have what looked like incredibly detailed wings drawn on her back. She adjusted the cloth panel on the back of her dress and Sweetie Belle buttoned the 2 buttons to hold it down for her. The same was true for Twilight. The Mares spent a few minutes admiring the details. They could even see the ribbing on the feathers and their colors subtly shifting. Then Sweetie Belle stepped over and buttoned the buttons on the cloth panel for her. Next time, Twilight would do it herself. The other detail was that all the females had luxurious waist-length hair. Applejack and Apple Bloom stood out from the others. Applejack because of her very out-of-place light brown Stetson hat and Apple Bloom because of her pink hairbow. Both of which were comically small on their human heads. Harry was rather surprised at how stunningly pretty Twilight looked. He knew from what others had said that as a pony she was considered quite cute and many had said she would be appealing in a few years. But even he could see she was going to get a lot of attention from the men in his world. Rarity's dressmaking, although wonderful on such short notice and vague patterns, had made no allowances for the melons the former Mares now possessed. Pony melons were in a completely different location and barely noticeable unless the pony was nursing. Even seeing the pictures in the magazine hadn't prepared Rarity for the reality of what that translocation meant. Or that the results would be so markedly different from what they considered normal. Or vary so much between individual Mares. Rarity and Twilight were what he thought would be average while Applejack and Holiday was surprisingly large. All 4 women were straining the upper stitching on what had been loose clothes, some much more than others. Harry knew the dresses would have to be altered when they returned. Rarity hadn't brought enough supplies to make changes on the spot. It also reminded Harry to mention that underwear would probably be a good idea. Although explaining the whys and hows would be incredibly embarrassing. It made his face hot just to think about it. "Whoa," said Spike, looking around. Harry pointed, "The play park is that way about 100 steps. He swung his arm about 120 degrees to his left, little whinging about 150 steps that way, but you have to go around a couple of fallen trees so it's a bit of a longer walk than that. You can't see anything from here because we're in a small depression." Harry looked at Spike and shook his head. Did Spike remaining a dragon instead of turning into a human mean there were dragons in his world and he had never known? Did that mean that because the fillies and Mares coming through as girls and women that there weren't Pegasi and unicorns in his world? "Spike," he said, "I'm sorry but you're really going to have to try to hide. There aren't dragons here that I know of and anyone seeing you will definitely call the guard." Spike shrugged. He was small, he could do that easily. They slowly made their way to the park. The fillies concentrated on making sure the Mares didn't fall down. They were getting better with every step, but it was still a learning experience. The uneven surface didn't help. Nor the adults' lack of shoes of any kind. They stopped at the forest edge to watch some children playing on the slides and swings. There were a couple of housewives on a bench, talking, as their toddlers played in a sandbox not far from the swings. A car drove down the street that bordered the west side of the park, getting all 3 Mares and Spike to stare at it. "What's that?" asked Applejack. "That's a cart with an engine that makes it move and everyone rides inside the covered compartment. No magic." One of Twilight's saddlebags that Spike was still carrying opened and a quill and paper floated out. Harry grabbed them. "Don't, Twilight. People will see and wonder how you did that. Then they would come over and we'd get caught." He stuffed them back into the bag while Twilight pouted. Rarity was staring intently at the 3 houses they could see on the other side of the road. "They're all the same," she said disapprovingly, "and so plain." "Let's head back, now," Harry suggested. "You need more practice walking or you'll attract unwanted attention." On the way back all four Mares started complaining about the small sticks and stones poking their feet. They were not used to things hurting their hooves as they walked, except in the rare case of a stick or stone hitting just the right part of the frog in their hooves. Harry stopped and balanced on one leg while holding the other across his knee and pointing at the sandal he was wearing. That's the other reason we need to go back. People wear shoes to protect their feet. If you don't have shoes, your feet will get cuts that can get infected and send you to hospital if you aren't careful. Sweetie Belle made these out of some thick scrap cloth you had at the boutique, Rarity. Once they were back in Equestria, Twilight said to the sergeant, "I'm sorry, but you'll have to place a watch on this now that we know where the portal is. I'm sure Princess Celestia will have a full garrison posted here by tomorrow afternoon at the latest." By now another 5 ponies had arrived. The sergeant quickly assigned 4 to maintain watch, 2 on the tree and 2 on their surroundings so they weren't ambushed by anything from the Everfree. They would change shifts with the other guards every 4 hours until relief from Canterlot arrived. The 4 Mares discovered that although they didn't have scratches on their hooves, the skin covering the backs of their pastern and cannon bones were scratched and very sore. It wasn't a real problem, but their legs ached all the way home. Twilight buried herself in the almanac before the tree portal was out of sight. Rarity, Applejack, and Holiday were quiet, while Holiday glared at Scootaloo who was doing her best to hide behind Harry and her 2 friends. Spike, riding on Twilight's back again, was the only one for conversation with them as he pestered the fillies and Harry with endless questions about what they had seen on their previous trips. The 3 Mares listened closely, and followed the colt and fillies to make sure none of them ran off into the forest chasing something. The Mares did not find the details the fillies were sharing amusing in any way, shape, or form. Applejack dragged Apple Bloom off as they reached the Sweet Apple Acres homestead, while Rarity took Sweetie Belle with her once they reached town. Rarity had a busy evening planned, she told them, as she not only intended an in-depth discussion with Sweetie Belle, but also planned on making sandals for them all based on the outlines they had made of their feet before returning through the portal. The glare she gave the filly while saying this promised the discussion was not going to be pleasant. Auntie Holiday led Scootaloo off with the promise that she and Auntie Loft were going to having a serious discussion with her after dinner, as well. All 3 fillies had looked back at Harry with expressions of dread as their sisters and relative dragged them by the ear towards their homes, with a constant ow, 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 Lego, ow. All he could do was give them each a mournful look of encouragement. It didn't seem to help much. Harry watched and marveled as Twilight unerringly walked from the tree portal into town and to the castle, opened the door, held it for him, and closed it, and then walked into the kitchen and started to fix the 3 of them a cup of tea, all without once taking her muzzle out of the almanac or making a single misstep. And making notes the entire while. It was quite impressive, actually. He wondered if it was just that her large eyes, in comparison to his as a person and not a pony, gave that much better peripheral vision. Or was she using her magic on an extremely low level that kept her from walking into anything or any pony? He would have to try that later. While Harry and Twilight sat at the table drinking their tea, Spike decided he needed to fix dinner and bustled around the kitchen with occasional stops to take a sip of his tea sweetened with sapphire dust instead of sugar. Only after eating dinner did Twilight put aside her research. "A very interesting book," she said. "Mostly statistics, but the section on your history was quite illuminating, the sports was not." She paused and looked at Harry. "Your people are quite violent." According to this, she tapped the book with a hoof, "Your home country, Great Britain, has had 162 wars in 278 years. It hasn't had a peace that lasted longer than 6 years in that entire time. As a whole, it looks like the countries of your home world have been at non-stop war for the last 3,000 years. Harry nodded. He knew they fought a lot, but that still was appalling considering that Equestria had been without a war for almost 1,000 years, until the last 2 years, in fact. Although all the equestrian fighting involved villains and not other countries trying to invade, except Chrysalis and the Changelings, of course. But the medicine advances they talk about, BLD transfusions, in vitro CNCPTN, vaccines, operating on fetuses, are mind-boggling. And your technology, you've been to the moon. She shivered in excitement. I can hardly wait to see it all for myself. She was trotting in place, again, and her eyes were glowing slightly at the prospects of the things she could learn. Twilight, focus, Spike said sharply. He pointed a claw across the table. Harry. Now that she was out of the current binge reading, there was hope he could get her back on track. Hogwarts. Remember? She gave Spike a blank look, then glanced at Harry. She blinked and Harry could see her mentally shifting from one topic to another. Oh, yes. She blushed. Sorry about that, Harry. It's just, she glanced down at the book, you know, knowledge. She shook herself. She pulled a checklist out of her saddlebag. All right. Go to guard post at the edge of the Everfree. Check. Check in with the guards. Check. Explain why we're there. Check. Request more guards. Check. Follow Harry to portal. Check. Find portal location. Check. Survey area around portal for dangers. Check. The portal still exists. Check. The portal is still accessible. Check. The portal hasn't moved. Check. The portal can still be used. Check. Harry and Spike sighed. This would take a few minutes for her to catch up. Return to library. Check. Fix tea. Check. Spike fixes dinner. Check. Eat. Check. Start new list for the evening. A blank scroll floated out of her saddlebag and unrolled beside her. Check. She set her list down and sighed, satisfied at completing her list. The quill started scribbling in the new scroll. All right, Harry, we know you can travel safely back and forth. The next question is, do you want to go to this Hogwarts school? She looked at him intently. Harry looked up, startled. Go to the school. Why would I want to go there? I like it better here. Besides, what would it cost? How would I pay for things? Where would I live? She nodded, her quill flying across the scroll. All good questions, I'll check with Princess Celestia about those things. As for why? Why, to learn about your world's magic. Her grin had a slightly manic look to it, wider than normal with her eyes also a bit wider. Her in-place trotting picked up speed. Just think of all the things you can learn there that we don't know here. A whole new world of magic. You'll be able to teach me so much when you come back. It's the opportunity of a lifetime. Her grin now stretched almost to her ears. He stared at her a moment. Do I have to? He asked softly. She stared at him as if he had grown a second head. Spike was staring, too. I mean, he continued just as softly, staring at the tabletop, I'll be gone for 9 months. He drew a circle on the tabletop with a hoof. I'll have to leave my friends. I'll be there and Scootaloo, Sweetie Belle, and Apple Bloom will be here. He looked up at her. I don't want to leave them. They're special. I've never had friends before. Twilight leaned back. This was a completely unexpected development. Harry could see that turning down the opportunity to learn new magic, the magic of his home world, left her perplexed. She couldn't understand it. She stared at him. He sighed again, looking at the tabletop dejectedly. She had told him last fall all about how Princess Celestia had taken her under her wing as her personal student when she was only 8, younger than him, and he would be 11 next week if he had calculated things right. But Twilight hadn't left everything behind, her parents had been right there in Canterlot. She had spent many evenings with them after they got off work and she finished her studies. Not to mention the family outings on weekends and holidays. As she had gotten older and the princess had taken a more active role in her education, she had moved into the castle and visited her parents and brother on weekends, whenever she wanted. And he knew this. He would be leaving everything behind. He didn't want to do that. He was loved here, he knew it. He didn't need to learn magic back there, he was perfectly content with the magic here. And his friends were here, not there. Besides, she had said she would never force him to go back. Unless that was a lie. He felt the beginnings of panic rear up. After a few moments, her expression slowly changed from puzzle to contemplation, to understanding. She smiled reassuringly at the colt. "No, Harry," she softly, her affection clear in her voice, "you don't have to go if you don't want to." She paused, thinking. "Perhaps we can ask the ponies at Hogwarts if your filly friends can go with you. Then you wouldn't be alone." She sidled up to him and wrapped a wing around him, cuddling him. Harry looked up at her hopefully. Really? If the girls came with him, well, then, he wouldn't care where he was. As long as it wasn't with the Dursleys. She shrugged, still smiling, "We can only ask. When we send your reply, we can state in it that you will only attend if your friends can, too. But they're not unicorns, will they be able to do magic?" Twilight laughed. "Pegasi certainly have magic, how do you think they fly and buck clouds? And earth ponies make things grow. That's certainly magical. You know that. And if the school says no, then you stay here." Harry ran a hoof through his mane, thinking. What will Applejack, Holiday, Lofts, and Rarity say? What if they say no? Twilight hummed to herself a moment. "I'm sure that I can convince them to let the fillies go with you." Slowly he nodded. "Right. When a princess, one of the rulers of your homeland, asks a favor, few are willing to refuse." Okay. Getting the girls to agree would be easy, all he had to say was, "We might get our cutie marks." Plus, they would jump at the chance to see his world without having to sneak past their relatives all the time. They were especially interested in seeing those things called films. If they were there officially, they'd have money and could do things like that. He wondered what they would think of a human amusement park. "Spike," Twilight said, interrupting him cleaning the dishes, "would you take down a message for Princess Celestia?" "Sure thing," the young Drake said, hopping down from his stool and waddling over to the table. He pulled a quill and blank scroll from Twilight's saddlebags. "Dear Princess Celestia. Harry and the fillies, Apple Bloom, Scootaloo, and Sweetie Belle, were kind enough to show me, Applejack, Holiday, Rarity, and the guards the location of the portal. It was right where we thought it should be. To open the portal you first have to want to go to Little Whinging, and then step through. That's why we didn't find it. We were looking for a portal, not a portal to Little Whinging. See enclosed notes and drawings, Appendix A. It's a lovely world. The forest around the portal is welcoming and quiet, although the air has a very mild but distinct taste of badly burnt cooking oil. After a few moments, though, I didn't notice it anymore. Harry says there are no dangerous wild animals anywhere nearby. We took a short walk of about 50 celestials to the park where he said his cousin accosted him last year. Based on preliminary measurements, the distance measured as a mile in the almanac is about 1,000 celestials, and a kilometer is about 700 celestials. See detailed notes and drawings, Appendix B. While we were there, a car, an enclosed conveyance for carrying ponies, drove by. It had neither ponies pulling nor magic moving it, and made quite a bit of noise. Nothing too objectionable, but we could easily hear it from over several hundred celestials. It was also made entirely of some shiny metal and had glass windows completely encircling it. For sketches and details of the car, see Appendix C. One important discovery I have made is that their feet are extremely sensitive, and the smallest pebble or thorn can bring instant pain. Shoes, as Harry has told us before, are a requirement. See enclosed drawing of the sandals Sweetie Belle made for them, Appendix D. In the park we saw 2 adults watching their children play on the swings and in a sandbox. As Harry has said about his people, they were all wearing clothes that completely covered them from neck to knees. For the girls, fillies, and the boys, colts, wore shirts with trousers that were either very short or reached to their feet. They all wore shoes. See enclosed notes and drawings of both the shoes and the playpark equipment, Appendix E. On the subject of Harry attending Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, he has decided that he will not attend the school by himself. He sees Equestria as his home and has little interest in leaving. In addition, spending 9 months away from here, bereft of his friends, when he has never had friends before, is not something he desires to do. However, he has said that if his friends, Apple Bloom, Scootaloo, and Sweetie Belle, were allowed to attend, then he would be willing to enroll with them. We intend to ask about that possibility when we send his letter to them. I can hardly wait to hear what he can tell me about their magic. This is just so exciting. See Appendix F for miscellaneous drawings and details about the other things we saw while there. Your faithful student, Twilight Sparkle. After watching Spike incinerate the missive with its accompanying scrolls, Harry sat back and thought about what this really meant. Up to now, he hadn't had the time to dwell on what it might actually mean to return to Earth. He no longer considered it his home. Home was here, in Equestria, with his filly friends. Learning what magic could do there might be interesting, it might be fun, but he could learn magic here. It was fun here. He would never be as powerful or as good at it as Twilight, but if you had all the spells you needed to do what you wanted, why did you need to know more? Twilight, he said quietly, would you teach me the book manifestation spell? Came the tinny reply. She was already into the almanac. The book manifestation spell, he repeated, louder. A moment later, she was back. She looked down at him for a moment, frowning. Why? He looked up at the ceiling, choosing his words carefully. If I'm going to learn Earth's magic at that school, I won't have such a good teacher as you doing it, so I'll need to study harder to learn the stuff. He dropped his gaze back to her. At least, based on what I remember of my primary teachers, you're much better than they were. You care more. You're more patient. Which means it's easier to learn from you. And you won't be there to teach me or to answer my questions. So, I need some way to study better, to really understand what the book is trying to tell me. And you've told me you'd be amazed what you can pick up when you're actually in a book. She blushed at his praise. Well, I'm not sure if you can do it. It is a fairly complicated spell compared to the ones most colts your age can cast. She stopped and smiled at him, but your levitation, teleportation, and illusionary spells are coming along nicely. I don't see why we can't see if you can MSTR it. A book flew off a shelf and landed in front of them, opening to a page near the middle. Here's the spell, she said, pointing with a hoof. Read it and let me know when you've got it. Harry stared at Twilight as she stared at the book. He could almost see her eyes glazing over at the prospects of what the book entailed. Spike sighed, anticipating a sleepless night. Twilight shook her head and looked around the library, thinking. Spike. Would you go tell Rarity, Sweetie Belle, and Pinkie Pie that I would like them to meet me here with the other Mares for breakfast tomorrow so we can plan? Harry, would you relay the same message to Holiday, Lofts, and Scootaloo? I'll do the same for Rainbow Dash, Applejack, Apple Bloom, and Fluttershy. Tell them this is at the princess's request. After they nodded their understanding, she teleported away, probably to Fluttershy's first. Seconds later, Harry was knocking on the door where Scootaloo lived. Harry could hear a loud voice inside. Lofty opened the door, and the voice became clearer. It was Holiday giving Scootaloo a right proper scolding. Harry Potter, said Lofty, what brings you here? The scolding in the background cut off and hoofsteps headed their way. He scuffed his hoof on the porch, feeling guilty for getting Scootaloo in trouble. He looked up the Scootaloo's aunt. Twilight Sparkle would like you, Holiday, and Scootaloo to come over tomorrow for breakfast. Princess Celestia and Princess Luna have a project they want you to help her with. It has to do with the portal and Scootaloo going to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry in the world on the other side with me. Scootaloo had him in a tight hug. You want me to go with you to learn magic? He shrugged and hugged her back. Well, yeah, you didn't think I would leave you, AB, and Sweetie behind, did you? You both have magic of a sort. I'm going to put in my letter that if you all can't go then I won't either. I'd rather be here with you than there without. She squeezed him even harder. Her aunts were exchanging looks behind Scootaloo, and Harry could see them mouthing "princesses" to each other with incredulous expressions. He smirked. Yeah, like they would ever say no to a request from Princess Celestia. And while Twilight was a princess, she didn't yet have the impact and seriousness that a 1,000-plus-year-old ruler did. Reluctantly, Scootaloo let him go. He noticed her eyes seemed a bit moist, but thought it probably was from the scolding she was getting when he arrived. Well, anyway, I'll see you tomorrow. He waved goodbye, and then turned and headed back to the library. He really needed to learn that book manifestation spell. He scrunched up his face. Books. School books. He had saddlebags, but most kids didn't use rucksacks at primary in Little Whinging. The Dursleys had never allowed him one, and Dudley had made sure his cast-offs were too torn and damaged for Harry to use. He didn't know if the students at Hogwarts carried rucksacks. And carrying books was always difficult, well, only because Dudley kept knocking them away from Harry every chance he could get. If only he could carry his books and school supplies without needing to carry them. Unless he could carry them in his magic was good enough to carry the books, but he wasn't sure about adding the paper and pens and gloves and the other things mentioned in the letter. He spent the rest of the evening trying to study the book manifestation spell while Twilight repeatedly interrupted him to ask his opinion about the princess's plans for contacting Earth authorities. After his first answer, find a really good solicitor, the rest became, I don't know, and ask the solicitor. It did sound like the princesses had been quite thorough in their plans, with contingencies on top of contingencies. The most optimistic plan had the British government treating them as honored guests and setting up exchanges of scientists and magicians to explore each other's world and societies, and seeking common grounds for trade and the exchange of knowledge. The next most likely was open hostility by the British military and viewing the Equestrians as an invading force intent on conquering them. The worst assumed a worldwide war erupting as the various countries of the world fought Britain and strove to seize the portal. In the last case, assuming that there was no hope of peaceful relations, the princesses planned to seal the portal from both ends. And there were a dozen variations on each of those outcomes. There was even a plan to attempt to send the portal into the sun if the portals couldn't be closed and the humans refused to take no for an answer. Nothing says, we don't want to deal with your CRP, better than moving the portal exit from a somewhat peaceful forest to the 20-million-degree heart of a star. The truly worrying thing was the address on Harry's letter. Did the Earth people now know about Equestria? Plus, the letter gave no indication on where the school was or how to get to it. They would have to ask for that information, which meant another letter would be sent to them, or perhaps a person would actually visit. If they could provide a location, a home, as it were, on the other side, maybe they could keep the secret of Equestria's portal safe for a little longer. When Harry and Spike went up to bed, Twilight was still studying the book and making her own branching checklist on what to do and when. It was already taking up the entire kitchen table after only a few minutes. Harry thought it would probably be the size of Ponyville when she finished, and folded into a single book that only showed the relevant branch at any one time. Harry did manage to get the book manifestation spell to work. It only lasted a few seconds, unfortunately. But he was in the book. And once he was in it and started looking around before he was ejected from it, he quickly realized that he did understand the spell better. It was as if the author herself was talking to him, showing him things about the spell that mere words couldn't convey. The next time would be much easier. The next morning everyone gathered in the castle's dining room. The fillies, after scarfing down their breakfast, stood beside Harry. They looked very happy at the prospect of going with him and openly exploring this new-to-them world. And the opportunity to do so without getting into trouble at home made it just so much sweeter. Princess Twilight was wearing her crown to impress upon everyone the importance of the issue. With numerous interruptions by Spike and Applejack to keep her on track, Twilight brought the other Mares up to speed on the current situation. So, Applejack said, the princesses want us to go to this, Earth, Harry's old home, and make sure he and the fillies are safely enrolled in this Hogwarts magic school. Twilight nodded, and helped Prince Blueblood set up an embassy. And they really think Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry is important enough that Harry and the fillies should go there? Asked Rarity, with a worried glance at her sister. Twilight nodded, again. Well, if not for the letter to Harry, even if we had found the portal we wouldn't have suspected that there were ponies there who could do magic. The only way we have to learn about that magic is for Harry to go to the school. She glanced at Harry. And he won't go without his friends, she said, looking at him with a soft smile. The fillies leaned a little harder against Harry. Hey, said Rainbow Dash, dismissively, I don't see the problem. It's a school. It can't be all that dangerous. They'll be just as safe there as if they were going to the Ponyville schoolhouse. Safer, even, because they won't be anywhere near the ever-free forest. Not to mention any of the crazy things that have happened in Ponyville the last 2 years, mumbled Rarity. Or their cutie mark crusades, finished Applejack. At that declaration the 3 fillies tried to look as innocent as possible to their respective relatives while those relatives were giving the stink eye to the fillies. Spike, even though he wasn't in their line of sight, still took a step to the side behind Twilight to partially hide from the irritated relatives. Unlike the cutie mark crusaders, his sense of self-preservation was working just fine, thank you very much. And, Twilight added soothingly, if it's anything like Princess Celestia's school for gifted unicorns, the students are always under close supervision at all times with classes of only a dozen or so at a time and plenty of one-on-one sessions with trained experts. And if there are dangerous activities planned, I'm sure they have extra staff on hoof to protect the students and take special safety precautions. And it's the opportunity of a lifetime. Just think of what they'll learn about these humans and how to interact with other species. She sighed and stared off into the distance with a wistful expression, her hooves twitched with the longing to stand and start trotting excitedly. The World Almanac Harry showed me says the British Library had over 10 million books 5 years ago. It would take 114 years, 1 month, 26 days, and 16 hours to read every book if I read 10 books an hour. Her gaze drifted down to look at the others, and they're adding tens of thousands more books every year. She sighed deeply as she again stared blankly at a wall. Harry was certain she was about to start drooling. It was clear to all that Twilight would have swapped places with Harry in an instant, if she thought she could get away with it. Applejack and Rarity exchanged worried looks. Dragging Twilight from the Royal Library was hard enough when they visited Canterlot. If they were foolish enough to let her walk into this British library, they might never get her back to Equestria. Twilight. Spike said sharply. She startled, then blushed. Right. The purple Alicorn looked at Rarity, Scootaloo's aunts, and Applejack. So, if the school agrees, will you let the fillies go with Harry as Princess Celestia has requested? If there ever was a cue for the diabetes-inducing cuteness of doom look that the fillies had perfected, Harry thought that was it. The 3 fillies turned to their respective elders with their moist, wide-eyed faces, trembling lower lips, hopefully canted ears, with one hoof ever so slightly lifted as if about to reach out, begging. Even that cold-hearted monster King Sombra would have caved to their cuteness. Not that it was really needed, Harry thought. Princess Celestia asking them to do something was a guaranteed yes answer, no matter how much the Mares might be reluctant to say so. First to fall was Rarity, who huffed and sighed, looked over to Twilight and reluctantly nodded. Then Scootaloo's aunts gave in, with lofty nudging Holiday and both giving a nod to Twilight. Applejack held out the longest, but seeing that the others had capitulated, she knew she couldn't hold her sister back. She sighed, okay, Twilight. If the school lets the fillies in then I won't stand in the way. The 3 fillies abandoned their posts and charged their relatives, giving them fierce hugs and declaring, thank you, you won't regret it, I promise, all while hoof-pumping their forelegs behind their relatives' backs. After putting her sister down, Rarity said, what next, Twilight? Twilight whipped her checklist out of her saddlebags, not that she needed to see it, she had, after all, memorized it as she wrote it, and said, let's see, that's done, she checked off over 24 items. Okay, now we need to check in with the guard at the portal. They should have the gold and gems we'll need to exchange for bits on the other side, pounds, they call them. The overall plan is to find a lawyer, a solicitor Harry says, who can then help us exchange our gold and gems. With her help we need to buy up as much property around the portal on their side as possible. That will also give us housing and a buffer zone. Because we want to keep this as quiet as possible until we are officially established as an embassy and can announce ourselves to the world, we'll use one of the homes we purchase as our official residence and not mention that we are from another dimension. We'll pretend we are from somewhere else in their world and only recently moved to Little Whinging, although we'll have to tell the solicitor the truth. We'll probably have to bring her through the portal to convince her we're not crazy. Once we have a house, Harry and the fillies will move in and we'll send the owl with Harry's answer. While we wait for a reply, Harry can show us what he knows about his world and we can assist Prince Blueblood in establishing an official embassy. Any questions? Where is this school? Asked Holiday. That's one of the questions we'll have to ask in the letter Harry sends, as well as where do we purchase the items mentioned in their letter, how we get to the school, and where we need to live for them to easily go to and from the school. Sounds good, declared Rainbow Dash, let's get going. She darted out the balcony window in a rainbow-colored blur. A moment later, she coasted back in. Where are we going first? The walk to the guard post was uneventful. Twilight told Holiday and Lofty, if you want, you can visit Earth later, after we've secured a hoofhold. Today, we'll just be popping in and out as the guards secure the area around the portal. And practice walking in our new forms. Nothing very exciting. Scootaloo's 2 aunts appeared grateful for a chance to beg off going with them. They were not explorers, after all. And with the guards and the main 6 along, their charge, Scootaloo, would be quite safe. They separated from the group as they reached the edge of Ponyville. We'll see you tonight, right, Scootaloo? Scootaloo nodded to her aunts and gave them a brief wave. The plan was that they were exploring only during the days until they had a house on the other side. Then they would move there for a short while before returning after getting their school supplies. Assuming the school agreed to the fillies attending, that is. The former Simple Guard post was a beehive of activity. A mass of earth ponies and unicorns were working at improving the trail separating Sweet Apple Acres from the Everfree, turning it into a real paved road such as one would find in Canterlot. Another group on the other side of the post was establishing a runway for the Pegasi-drawn chariots, bringing building materials and more workers that were still landing wherever they could find room. 2 other groups were on opposite sides of Harry's trail into the Everfree, removing the trees to make an opening at least 200 celestials wide in its place. A steady stream of ponies were going into the forest while an equally steady stream brought out down trees and other debris. Meanwhile dozens of armored Pegasi were flying overhead and armored unicorns and earth ponies were patrolling the perimeter of the forest. Even Twilight seemed taken aback at the scale of the activity. As they approached, a guard supervising one of the road crews noticed them and came over immediately. "Good morning, Princess Twilight Sparkle, I am Major Smokey," she said, saluting. She eyed the colt, fillies, and mares. "We've been expecting you. Right this way, please." She turned and led them over to the guard post and then inside. "Lieutenant Colonel Shining Charge, ma'am. Princess Twilight Sparkle and her companions are here." A large table dominated the main room. The Pegasus guard standing behind table looked up from the papers piled on it and nodded. "Dismissed," she said, returning the other's salute before turning her attention to Twilight. "Have you read the Alien Contact Protocols book, Your Highness?" she asked. "Yes, last night," Twilight said. "I've prepared a checklist," which she then spent the next 15 minutes explaining to the poor lieutenant colonel. "Excellent," said the guard, narrowly getting a word in edgewise as the Alicorn stopped to take a breath. "We haven't breached the portal yet. Word that you've already explored a bit yesterday has the scouts waiting for your feedback before proceeding. How serious an issue is it for shoes?" Startled at the change of subject, Twilight said, "Very serious. Even though we only went a few hundred paces in the forest there, the skin on the back side of our pastern and cannon bones was very scratched up and sore by the time we returned. Harry spoke up. Shoes are a requirement. While not having shoes isn't a safety issue once you leave the forest, not wearing shoes will get your scouts immediately noticed. There are even some businesses where they will be refused entry if they aren't wearing shoes. The lieutenant colonel looked at Harry a moment, then nodded. She looked up at Twilight. We'll need you to conduct our scouts across so they can take measurements to make these shoes. We've had seamstresses working overnight making clothes using that magazine you provided as a guide. Harry wasn't used to adults actually listening to him, especially an adult he did not know. On the other hand, the ponies were different from people. He decided to try again, that might actually be a problem. The lieutenant colonel looked at Harry. Why? Well, Harry said hesitantly, that magazine is a fancy fashion magazine and most of the clothes in it are things regular people wouldn't wear, only rich people. He had seen his aunt spend hours wishing she could purchase this or that in it, but they didn't have the pounds to spare to do it. He paused a second, trying to think of how to put it. The ponies didn't normally wear clothes. It's like, can you imagine taking Canterlot nobles in full grand galloping gala dress and dropping them into a small town and telling them to blend in? How fast would the locals notice them? The lieutenant colonel leaned back and sat down. Yes, I see your point. She turned to a guard pony standing by the door. Get the scouts here, and the clothes they have for the other side. She turned back to Harry. I'll need you to take a look and tell me how much we have to redo. He looked up at Twilight. We'll only get one chance to do this right. I don't want to ruin it on something as simple as the wrong tie. Harry tuned out the discussion that followed as Twilight informed the lieutenant colonel of how she thought the operation should be conducted once they reached the other side. He had heard all this the night before. Instead, he walked to the table and propped himself up against it so he could see if there was anything interesting. Covering most of the table was a map. From the markings, even though they were upside down, he could tell that it was a map of the area around here. As he studied the map, the fillies joined him on either side. He was stunned at the plans. They planned to enclose the portal and the path to it in a huge wall. Inside that wall, the portal and tree were in the middle of a large space with a small drop-off around it masking several small enclosures connected by tunnels. After a moment of staring, he realized that the dotted lines leading from those enclosures to the portal were labeled fields of fire. They were planning for the possibility that an attacking force might come through the portal and had prepared a military response for it. Harry wasn't too sure how effective that would be in the face of Earth's modern firearms. On the larger external wall were walkways and fortified towers to keep the ever-free forest denizens at bay. The 50 celestial cleared and paved perimeter outside the wall would be a big help in that. Harry noted they were designed as attack platforms towards the portal, as well, although that aspect was carefully hidden behind walls marked facades. Partway down the path, and separating the portal from the path to the former guard post, was a thick wall dozens of celestials thick. It had a gate at each end of the path through it. Lining both sides of the wall and the gap in between were offensive military platforms. If someone came through the portal, and somehow subdued the military out there, they would still have to go through the one gate and fight off the new guards behind their fortified emplacements while trying to make it through the second gate. And the same would be true if someone on this side tried to force their way to the portal. Any offensive force that tried to attack through the portal would take heavy losses, even with modern equipment, Harry realized. And that wasn't even taking into account how effective magic was on this side. Outside those gates, but still between the walls keeping the forest at bay, were several buildings, 2 military barracks, a processing building, an administration building, 2 apartment buildings, a hotel, and an exercise field. All the buildings were connected underground, so if one building started to fall into enemy hands, the occupants could be evacuated to another. He noted at least 2 tunnels that led into the forest outside the walls as last-ditch heavily fortified escape routes. It was a massive operation, and even with the numbers of workers they had seen so far it would take weeks of hard work to complete. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 7. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author tkepner on fanfiction.net. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video, till then goodbye. Asasas.